We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
I didn't set out to do a true crime podcast. I don't think I'm good at true crime, really, and it's not really a space that I want to play in. But you can't talk about Amityville without talking about the true crime aspect of it, right? We're tiptoeing into last podcast, my favorite murderer territory here.
I mean, here's a good overlap between the two. That when I read this in two different articles that I read, one from El País English and also Realtor.com that actually has a blog and has an article on the Amityville house.
Wow.
Guess what time investigators believe Butch DeFeo started murdering his family?
Well, I mean, all of the rumors would have it be 3:15 a.m., right? Because that's when George Lutz was waking up all the time, right?
Apparently not a rumor. Apparently from court documents, allegedly the time police believe he began killing his family, approximately that time. And you might wonder, how? What a coincidence. But in fact, the Lutzes were working with William Weber, Butch DeFeo's defense attorney.
Oh, right. We are
he
going to
would know that information.
Oh, my God.
So, there you have it, folks.
Yeah, William Weber. We mentioned that, I think, in the very first episode. Or no, it was the second episode when we talked about the actual murder. We mentioned William Weber just in passing, but oh boy, are we going to talk about William Weber this episode. He is going to be prominent front and center with some of our favorite paranormal investigators as well.
Okay, well, we're going to get into that and so much more in this fourth episode of Amityville. We've got Katie across the table.
Hi.
And we got Maddie J.
Yo.
And I'm EJ, and we are slaying monsters.
That's right. This is it. We're going to wrap up the Amityville haunting today. So when we last left the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, it had seen some shit. First, there was the family annihilation perpetrated by Ronald Butch DeFeo, who killed his parents and siblings with a rifle. Then the alleged hauntings inflicted on the Lutz family, including reports of demonic forces like Jody the Pig. These were so terrifying and psychologically damaging that the Lutzes fled their new home in the middle of winter after spending only 28 days in the house. Channel 5 News in Amityville had caught wind of this story. That thread, the scene of a murder causing the new occupants to run away in terror, was just too juicy to pass up. And so the media department there contacted their local ghost hunting group, the New England Society for Psychic Research, and got demonologist Ed Warren and his medium wife Lorraine on the case. Nesper brought their own investigator too, a guy named Paul Bartz, who had been working with them and helping them with their equipment. And as an interesting little side note, Paul Bartz had kind of a double role with the Warrens and Nesper. He was also their agent. They show up at the house, and Ed, he's remarkably good at giving people what they want to see. And so the night of March 6th, 1976, he conducted a seance in the dining room of that house. This is Ed's shtick at this point. We talked a little bit about it in the last episode. And I think, Katie, you brought up how at first the Warrens were investigating just ghosts and hauntings and things. And then after The Exorcist came out, they jumped on that bandwagon. And all of a sudden it was like, we're doing seances and we're contacting demons and demonic forces and shit, right? So present at this seance was Marvin Scott of Channel 5 News and a couple other local psychics, because why the hell not, right? Allegedly, the energy in the room that night was so powerful that one of the accompanying psychics felt so ill that they had to leave. And that pushed Ed to end the seance because he was concerned that the negative energy was so powerful and they were channeling it. But Lorraine said, no, we're going to push through. And she made contact with a malevolent entity. And she said, whatever is here is, in my estimation, most definitely of a negative nature. It has nothing to do with anyone who had once walked the earth in human form. It is right from the bowels of the earth.
Getting at the fact that Butch was influenced by some demonic entity to do what he did. I hate this shit. This was on a Ghost Adventures episode we saw recently. Some murder happened and somebody was like, oh, it wasn't because you were angry and wanted to murder somebody. It was the ghost. It was a demon. Right. And I'm like, can we please just take responsibility for our actions for one fucking minute? Like,
apparently Butch DeFeo from prison, like later after he had been in prison, I think many years, I forget which of the articles I read this in, he scoffed at the idea that there were demons in the house and said, we all know who the demon there was. It was me.
Yeah.
Even the dude who murdered his own family is like, please.
Yeah. Well, and eventually he recants the whole thing. Yeah, I think in the 90s, Butch ended up saying, like, yeah, there was nothing in the house. It didn't influence me at all. It was me. He waited until there was no chance of him getting off on insanity or a demonic possession. I don't know. I think the idea was that if you could push the idea of demonic possession, enough people would then say, oh, well, this is insanity. And then you could get him off on an insanity plea. Because obviously demonic possession is not admissible in court.
No. I mean, didn't we talk about in the very first episode that he always was uncomfortable with the insanity plea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he was like, I'm not insane.
Yeah, he didn't want
I killed
to be
my
perceived.
family.
Yeah, he didn't want to be perceived as insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we can get more into this later. I know we're not a true crime podcast, but I read some interesting things where, like, obviously, you're not a good person if you're murdering your whole family. But some of the articles I read sort of insinuated that it was not a nice household. And it might not just have been because he was, like, a mean, horrible sociopath who murdered his family. Like, shit was going down. Yeah.
Hold that thought. Yeah, we'll there's space for that later on.
Yeah.
Yep. During this seance, drawn by this negative force, Ed and Lorraine made their way upstairs to the second floor sewing room. And in that room, they said that they experienced cold spots, and their camera operator, the one working for Channel 5 News, claimed that he had heart palpitations that had absolutely nothing to do with all of the coffee that he drank in preparation for doing an overnight shoot. Lorraine concluded that whatever this malevolent force was, it could move through the house at will and sometimes possessed inanimate objects, like the teleporting lion statue that we talked about. Apparently, it also possessed the fireplace sometimes, which seems like a very strange thing to possess. But you remember that there was the horn-headed thing that appeared in the fireplace, you know. After the final seance, Lorraine concluded, the force is still here. Nobody could possibly live in this house until something is done. Ed determined that the house was demonically charged because remember, Ed's promoting himself as a demonologist at this point. And he said that the house needed an exorcism. It's not clear if an exorcism was ever actually performed as a result of his recommendation. We know that he did not conduct one, unlike the emergency exorcism that he performed during the Perrin case. The production crew, alongside Nesper's crew, shot a whole bunch of photographs throughout the house during their investigation. And allegedly one of these photos, taken in the stairwell, shows a boy's face peering over the banister. In the image, the child's eyes appear to have this like unnatural glowing light to them. And that photograph, Ed claimed, must have been the spirit of John DeFeo, one of the murdered children. This photo has gotten
like this doesn't even look fake. Like that looks like a real person.
No, it's a ghost.
The camera reflecting off of his eyes.
It's a ghost, Katie. It's a ghost boy.
Oh my God. It's like the lady with her coat hanger dolls that she was manifesting. Like, who's looking at this photo being like, oh, a ghost? Like, it's just a kid standing there. Anyway, keep going.
Okay, so I think one of the reasons that the photo has really become infamous is because very few people have actually had the chance to investigate the house. So there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to duplicate that photo. Unlike, a historical location or a tourist area, Amityville, that house is still a private residence. So you don't have ghost hunters just stomping all over it all the time, right? And I can see how the photo is a little creepy. You can't see the kid's irises. They're just like these white blobs, It almost looks like he's blind. And the Warrens, during their investigation, they didn't have a kid there. So who was this boy? The answer to these questions actually comes from what the boy is wearing, particularly that plaid shirt that you see he has on, a plaid button-down shirt. We can't tell the colors, but we can clearly see it through the balusters of the railing. The shirt's pattern actually matches the one worn by a member of Nesper's investigation team and the Warrens' agent, Paul Bartz. As for the glowing eyes, this photo was taken with an infrared modified camera. And infrared is famous for creating dead eyes in subjects. If you watch ghost hunting shows and you see this, the like black and white cameras that they use, they're exactly like this. And they can do that to the eyes at certain distances. They'll just become these empty orbs. Mm-hmm. That's pretty clearly Paul Bartz. If you look at any of the other photos from that investigation, he is wearing exactly that shirt.
I thought it was a little boy, though.
Well, a little boy. It's at the height of a little boy, which just means that Paul Bartz was on his hands and knees, sticking his head
what I was gonna
around
ask.
the corner of the door.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Come on now.
I read that people thought it was like his kid.
It's not his kid. If you look at the photos of the rest of the investigators, including Paul Bartz, he's wearing the identical shirt, and Kenny Biddle, who works for the Skeptical Inquirer, he actually pointed out that Paul Bart's hair matches the boy's hair perfectly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you look at a picture of Paul Bartz, it looks like him. Mm-hmm. He's young. He's a young man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He is really young.
Yeah.
Yep. It's him. It's clearly him. Now, Ed Warren, disingenuous person that he was, had to know that alleged boy in the photograph was clearly Paul Bartz. Like, it just was. He probably faked that photo. But he claimed that it was a genuine ghost photograph. And that, coupled with Lorraine's seances and all of the growing speculation around this property, helped to propel this mythos. And so when Channel 5 news program aired this segment with the photograph, it cemented this idea that there was a haunting at the Amityville house.
Weren't the Channel 5 news folks there, though?
They were. But
so they must not have seen it and fake it.
So there was a point during the investigation where they went outside to, I guess, capture exterior shots, and they left Ed, Lorraine, and Paul inside to do infrared photographs. And that's when they did the dirty work.
Just like any good hoaxer, waiting for the right moment.
And I don't know that this is true, but it would be totally in keeping with Ed Warren's style to tell them to do that. To say, well, why don't you go outside and you capture some of the exteriors? We're not going to do anything interesting here. We're just going to go around and
take some photos.
Yeah, take some photos.
Down.
We'll let you know if we catch anything, And they faked it. Now, in March of 1977, 1 year after the Channel 5 program aired, Jim and Barbara Cromarty moved into the house. They'd purchased the property for $55,000, which is $25,000 less than what the Lutzes paid.
Wow.
My how houses have inflated.
I
know. The house most recently sold, I know this from Realtor.com. The house most recently sold in 2017 for $605,000.
That's still cheap, though.
That's not that expensive. I mean, that was 2017. The housing market has changed a lot
it's changed
since then.
so much. Now it's probably over $1 million.
But even so, I'd love to compare it to houses around and what they're worth? Because I think that's still really cheap for I would assume that most of those houses are at least $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful house.
It is.
This is to reiterate the thing I've been saying all through this. I love that it's still a family home because it's a beautiful house, and it would be sad for it to just be limited to, you know, being a haunted house and just existing for people to come traipsing through and like try to find ghosts.
Yeah.
It would be annoying for the neighborhood.
I think one of the problems with people moving in there is that people, like tourists, come and they stare at your house and they take pictures of it. Like, even the Cromedies end up changing the address and stuff, but people know where it is. You know, they change the windows. You can figure it out. You know, the Cromedies will remain in the property for a decade and have no ghost incidents at all. And we talked about how they allowed Joe Nickel to investigate the property, and they found no evidence of damage to the doors, windows, anything else like that.
Yeah. Sorry, just because I thought this was interesting, I think it was also on the Realtor.com article I read. Apparently, they did try to sell it after like a year because they were annoyed with everybody coming all the time. And they couldn't get a legitimate buyer. And it doesn't define what legitimate is, but I like to think that they didn't want to sell it to just some person who wanted to like think of it as a ghost house.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So they decided to stay and try to change the narrative about the house, which we already discussed that they worked really hard to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did try to sell it, and then they were like, you know what? We're just going to deal with it, and we're going to try and make this place different, which, again, heart.
I know.
Well,
I really appreciate that about them.
I don't know about Barbara, but Jim Cromartie grew up in Amityville. So it was very important to him that the house not end up being like a murder house or a haunted house or something like that. So it's totally in line and in keeping for him to not want that to be just gobbled up by somebody who is going to turn it into a tourist attraction, you know? Honestly, after the Cromarties came in, the whole story should have faded into obscurity, and it might have, if not for a drunken night with defense attorney William Weber. But to understand that, we need to take stock of this situation for a minute. Okay, so remember Butch DeFeo, the Amityville murderer? He had ended his relationship with his original defense attorney. That was Jacob Singfried, who was trying to get him out on a plea of insanity because he murdered his entire family. But Butch didn't want his sanity to be called into question, and he threatened to strangle Singfried if he tried, which is very ironic. Singfried and Butch parted ways, and William Weber ended up representing Butch instead.
Although I don't know, I think a sane person has every right to be very angry if they're called something that they don't believe that they are.
I guess so.
And we know he's a violent person.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with EJ, and here's why, actually, because reading these articles, particularly the El País English article about what happened, like, I believe obviously he's a violent person, but if his motivation was what this article indicated that it might have been, which is because of like severe abuse, it might make you violently angry for someone to suggest that you're insane when you're like, no, motherfucker, I was getting revenge because you think I'm a terrible person. The person that I murdered is way more awful than me, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, that is not in any way justifying it, just for the record. Yeah. But like, I don't know, to EJ's point, he's like, I'm not insane. I did it on purpose.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess there is that. I was not motivated by any outside force. I did this because, yes, my father was a very abusive person, which is what Butch was claiming, that he was abused at the hands of his father, and that he was getting revenge. And I guess maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's similar to the Menendez story, which was so huge in as we were growing up in the 90s. It was the 80s or 90s. The Menendez brothers, who murdered their parents because they claimed to be horribly abused as well.
Right.
It's a very, it's not, it's something that we've seen before. I mean, Butch came first, but you're not necessarily insane, you know, and if you have tendency toward violence, then you're going to be angry when people miscategorize you.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess the question, we are the wrong podcast to answer this question, but the question of, is it insane to want safety in your own house and living situation? You know?
Yeah, I mean, none of this is justified.
Not
what
at
he
all.
did.
No, not
but
at all.
This is the thing that got me about the Menendez brothers too. I'm like, just fucking leave. You're in your late teens, early 20s. Nobody is chaining you to a radiator in the house. Like, get the fuck out, cut your ties with your abusive father, and start your own fucking life. Don't kill the family.
Well, and that's part of the problem with Butch too, is like, okay, so maybe if we give you that your father was abusive and that was maybe the motivation behind this murder, you still murdered the rest of your fucking family.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you also murder your mother, you know, and I again, Slaying Monsters does not believe that any of this is justified.
This is not okay.
But maybe he murdered his father because his father was abusive. He murdered his mother because she was complicit in the abuse, or at least complacent about it. But you still murdered your 4 siblings too.
So the El País English article that I read, that I was like pretty detailed, they were actually basically summarizing Rick Osuna's book, The Night the DeFeos Died, like kind of taking his tack on it. Rick believes in the multiple shooter theory, which apparently like multiple law enforcement officers have also stated that they think is more plausible, though that has never ever been the official court record or line. He thinks that Dawn, the oldest sister who was 18, was also involved, that they were plotting together because their dad was super abusive, and that Dawn is the one that killed the kids. This is Rick Osuna's opinion, because she didn't want to leave them with the trauma of like their parents being killed. And then Butch like freaked out because Dawn killed the kids and killed Dawn. And Rick also thinks that Butch's friend was involved in killing his parents. So that like, this is what Rick thinks, the author of this book. And he did like tons of research. He got access to like court records, like all this kind of stuff. He talked to a bunch of people. Again, we're not a true crime podcast, but I thought this was interesting, and I think it sort of like contextualizes what we're going to get into about this being a hoax. Like, Butch and Dawn agreed they were going to kill the parents. Butch and his friend went and killed the parents. Dawn, meanwhile, kills the kids. Then Butch is like, what the fuck? Kills Dawn. End of story. But I thought it was interesting because one of the reasons that Rick thinks that this is true is because there was actually a bullet found in the main bedroom that was not from Butch's rifle. So that was really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I thought that was really interesting context of like another theory of what happened besides Butch just went in and killed his whole family.
I'll throw one more thing on that.
Yeah.
Is that they found powder marks on Dawn's body that indicated that she discharged a firearm. And there's debate over whether it was just that she was shot at extremely close range and had the powder marks on her, or if she had actually discharged a firearm, and that's why she had the powder on her. We don't know.
This is all to say, we don't know. Nobody knows. I do think it's interesting that Butch never actually gave his motivation at any point while he was in prison. And this is just me totally editorializing and reading between the lines, but it makes me feel like he was protecting, even though they were dead, he was like protecting his siblings. He was protecting Dawn, maybe even protecting his friend if his friend was involved, because he's like, yeah, we did this. And I like decided that I was going to take the fall for it. He still clearly was not a good person, but like, or he was clearly a violent person, as you said, EJ. But that article gave me a much more sympathetic, if not empathetic view of what happened. Not to justify any of it or say that he should have done it, but yeah.
So to bring it back to our narrative about the ghosts here, you have Butch DeFeo, who has now kind of been subject to this attorney musical chairs thing. He lost Siegfried. William Weber comes in. William Weber finds himself with very little time to prepare the case before it goes to trial. And the whole story is so public and so gruesome that it just feels very open and shut to everybody. Like, it's hard to put that in front of a jury and have the jury not be like, well, dude's guilty, the end, you know? And Butch wasn't willing to plead insanity, so he was just kind of fucked by the whole thing. Butch got convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life at the end of 1975, right before the Lutzes moved in. But William Weber still wanted to give his client a second chance. The problem, of course, being that you can't get a new trial just because you didn't have enough time to plan out your strategy. You actually need a viable reason to get a retrial. And Weber thought he could create one that would satisfy both the jury and his client. His thinking was, what if Butch was driven to murder not just by insanity, but by the demonic spirits in the house? But to carry out that plan, Weber needs two things. He needs cooperation from the current owners of the house, the Lutzes, and he needs proof of the paranormal inside the house. The answer to William Weber's first problem came pretty easily, because in early 1976, he met with the Lutzes. He would later tell the Associated Press that he and George Lutz split several bottles of wine, with George drinking most of it. During their meeting, Weber told George that his family's experiences while they were living in this, quote, haunted house could be very useful and very lucrative. And by the end of the night, they had agreed to publish a book together. We know that all of this is true because in March of 1976, Weber sent George Lutz a book contract. The document also founded a new company, the Hoffman, Weber, Burton, and Mars Corporation. Burton was Weber's partner, Mars was an alleged medium, and Hoffman was Paul Hoffman, who was a novelist. According to this book contract, Weber, his partner, and the medium would each receive 12% of the profits of the book. The Lutzes would receive 24%, or 12% each, George and Kathy. And Hoffman, as the writer, would receive the remaining 40%. Okay? But the Lutzes started having second thoughts. I suspect that the Lutzes were offended when they saw that contract and, Weber had been talking about all this money they could make, and then he turns around and he delivers them a contract that only pays them less than a quarter of the profits of this book, right? He shot himself in the foot, I think, because he convinced them, dude, we're going to make a boatload of cash on this thing, and then undercut them, basically. And so they decided to strike out on their own. Independently, the Lutzes contacted publisher Prentice Hall and author Jay Anson and offered them the chance to write the story instead. And instead of this weird convoluted contract with a medium and Weber and his partner and all this shit, the Lutzes said, let's do a 50-50 split. 50% to the publisher, 50% to us.
They're smart because they knew that without them, it wouldn't work.
Exactly.
They were really a key factor in this.
Yeah, Weber has no foot to stand on.
Yeah, they had all the leverage, really.
He can't do it without them.
Yep. In February of 1976, while Weber is still drafting up this contract, George Lutz discreetly contacted a local paranormal investigator named Stephen Kaplan and asked if he would like to investigate the hauntings. Because they knew that if they were going to strike out on their own, they needed their own team that could prove the hauntings, right? Now, Stephen Kaplan, born in 1940, he was a hard-headed researcher, I would say. He attended City College of New York. He earned 2 master's degrees from State University of Stony Brook. But his real interest was always the paranormal and the esoteric. During his time at Stony Brook, he started teaching parapsychology and occult studies. He was kind of a contemporary of Ed Warren without being a complete shyster. Kaplan actually turned to demons and ghosts in the 1970s in the wake of this, the whole rise of occultism. But he took a different tack than Ed and some of the other parapsychologists. In 1971, he founded the Vampire Research Center, which conducted, I'm not kidding, a vampire census in America.
What? How?
I don't know.
I need
don't
to see
know.
the questionnaire that you're sending out for this.
Oh my god.
I am not sure if they were self-reported vampires or if they were checking. I don't know.
Like,
But
have you ever met a vampire? You check yes or no.
so do you want to guess which state in America has the most vampires?
Ooh. I'm going to say Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, Katie.
I was going to say that, but I was like, which state is the darkest? Alaska.
Ooh.
California.
What?
Yeah.
I actually, yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Of course, because there's the most kooks living in
Yeah.
California who would think that they are vampires.
We love you, California.
Love California. Love it
Yeah,
deeply.
we love you, California. But this is what Stephen Kaplan said about your state. Vampires are sexually charismatic, high-energy people, and that's LA people. Besides, in California, if you're unusual, no one will notice you.
That's true. I mean, listen, that's not an incorrect description. Also, as we learned in Twilight, vampires sparkle. They can actually, so it's okay. Though that doesn't actually make a lot of sense because while I agree with his description, vampires, what's the one thing we know about vampires? They can't be in the sun. And like LA is the sunniest place.
All the time.
All the
Yeah.
time.
I like your Alaska because then you get like a month of darkness. Vampires would totally live in Alaska.
Most of the winter, you could be outside most of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, makes way more sense.
Yeah, and like I would also say that New York City would be a high vampire area because nobody pays attention to you in New York City. You can do
No.
whatever the fuck you want.
Also, there's so much nightlife.
Yeah.
Yes. And quite frankly, there's a lot more like, if we're being stereotypical about it, there's a lot more like goth and punk weirdos in New York City than there are in LA.
Yeah.
In LA,
Yeah.
everyone's very shiny and like wellness centered.
Yeah, that's the Twilight vampire. The Twilight vampire lives in Hollywood where they sparkle and shine and are very like, off-centered. And then you have the goth cool vampires in New York City.
Yeah.
And then they go to war.
Then they war. They go to war in like Nebraska, the middle, no man's land. It's like,
They go to
Neutral
war in
ground.
Alaska. Everyone has to
Alaska.
travel.
yes.
Yeah, we're traveling for the war. I know it doesn't seem like it, but Stephen Kaplan, vampirologist, is about to become the most important skeptical voice in the Amityville horror case. Because when George Lutz contacted him, he really played up, oh my God, I'm so scared of this house. I'm afraid to go back there. I just can't face it again. All of this. He implored Kaplan, you have to come investigate this house. I'll even pay you for your time. And as a true researcher, Stephen Kaplan said, I don't charge for my investigations. I wouldn't think of taking money from someone who's so terrified as you. He said to George Lutz on no uncertain terms that he would do whatever it took to get to the bottom of the hauntings. And he said, I also assure him that if it is a hoax, I will not hesitate to expose it. Which makes sense, because if you take a very frightened George Lutz at his face value, for all of the LA vampire counting weirdness, Kaplan was a skeptic. He said, I'm a parapsychologist. I have actually seen ghosts, and I know beyond a doubt that they exist. I also know that this is a very easy area to pull off a hoax. People love ghost stories, but each time a hoax occurs, it takes away the credibility of legitimate researchers.
Wow, this guy should have had his own ghost show.
He would have in modern day, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. He's reminding me, and maybe this is giving like Jason Hawes too much credit, but I feel like Jason Hawes is the most famous ghost hunter that feels as close to this person as that we have.
I think so. That like, I've seen it, I believe in it, but I also believe that a lot of people are taking you for a ride. And I want, Because he understood that in order to prove that what he believed was true, he needed to clear out the clutter of the hoaxes and the mistakes and all of that shit. And he couldn't
there's so many.
Yeah, he couldn't just walk into any old building and be like, oh, there are ghosts here, the way all the shows do now. You had to go to some of them and be like, there's nothing here, you know?
Right. And that's why the OG Ghost Hunter shows are really the best. Because there's just... If you can't find them for a very brief period, Discovery Plus was playing the whole Ghost Hunters archive, and I watched it. Those first episodes are such classics because first off, the whole team is weird and rusty. It's a new genre. It's like the year 2007
they
or
built
something
that
insane.
Genre. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking rusty. Like, these people clearly are just plumbers and they are not made for TV. They are just there with their like friends doing stuff. Mm-hmm. But like, to Stephen Kaplan's point, most of the time, nothing happens or nothing, like things might happen. There might be a weird noise. There might be this, there might be that, there might be readings, but they're like, oh yeah, your plumbing's fucked up. Your electricity's fucked up. Well, we did hear this weird noise, but quite honestly, like, there's nothing we can actually say about it one way or the other. And I loved that about it.
Yeah.
I loved that like 90% of the time nothing happened because I think it lends legitimacy to the times, as Stephen Kaplan said, you got to get out all the fluff.
Yep.
So that when you say like, this was weird, people know you mean it.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Stephen Kaplan, of course, that set off alarm bells in George Lutz's mind. And so George called Kaplan a week later and said, we're canceling the investigation. Not happening.
He didn't even get to investigate?
He didn't investigate at all.
Oh,
nope,
man.
didn't even set foot in the house. Yep.
George Lutz is like, no, you misunderstand me, sir.
Well,
I need someone to confirm my previous assumptions.
Now, of course, he couldn't say that. But so what he said was, this whole thing has gotten too big. I don't want the publicity. That's what he told Stephen Kaplan. I don't want the publicity. Stephen Kaplan was like, okay, weird, but whatever, fine. And he went back to, I don't know, planting garlic bulbs or whatever he does, right? But to Kaplan's surprise, the next time he heard the name George Lutz was on Channel 5 News with Ed and Lorraine Warren bumbling through the house. That's a little bit odd for someone who claimed to be so afraid of publicity, right? Kaplan quickly connected these dots. George Lutz actually wanted a paranormal investigator to pull off a big publicity stunt. He didn't like that I, Stephen Kaplan, would expose the hoax if there was one. He wanted somebody that he could pay off to say, holy shit, look at all the demons in my house. That person, no surprise, was Ed Warren. But now, the professional vampirologist was deeply involved in the story of Amityville and had a personal chip on his shoulder. Because he believed that George Lutz had taken everybody for a ride, and he decided, I'm going to conduct my own independent investigation, not of the Ocean Avenue house, but of George and Kathy Lutz.
Hell yeah.
Oh, man.
Because this is an affront to everything he believes, right? He believes in this shit. He believes ghosts are real, and now he believes that someone is lying.
This is the right attitude to have. Like, if you really believe in ghosts, I love the skeptic who believes it. Like, I am down to hang with the skeptic who believes in ghosts.
Absolutely.
Like, yes, because you're the one that's going to find it. You're the one that's actually going to prove that they're real. Not like, I love you, but not Zach Bagans, who thinks every floating moth and dust particle is a spirit. Like, no.
No.
Or the MUFON people. The MUFON people who really, really are passionate about aliens, who are skeptical.
They used to be.
Well, some are, though.
Some are.
Some are
It's
still
true.
skeptical.
Some are.
Yeah.
So one of the immediate things that struck Kaplan as he started to look into them was the way that George Lutz referred to Ronald Butch DeFeo during their conversation. Because when he was talking about the murder, George admitted he knew about it, and he called the murderer Ronnie several times. That's familiarity, and that seemed very strange to Kaplan. And it got stranger still when the Lutzes held a press conference in a law office, the law office of William Weber, defense attorney for Ronald DeFeo. So clearly the Lutzes were more than tangentially connected to the murder case. Kaplan took a trip to Amityville to investigate the location, and he started talking to the neighbors and started learning their opinions of Butch DeFeo. They described Butch as a drunk, a drug addict, and a thief. As for the house itself, when Stephen Kaplan showed up, the storm door was damaged, he said, but the interior door was still intact. And of course, that'll later be corroborated by Joe Nickel. Most interestingly, a newspaper article was published in February of 1976, claiming that the Lutz's furnace had gone out immediately after they moved into the house, and they didn't have the money to fix it. This will become a cornerstone of the book later on. It was always cold in the house and whatever. But it also shows just how poor the family was and how dire their financial struggles must have been if they couldn't fix their furnace in the middle of winter. About 2 months later, Kaplan actually got the opportunity to go inside the house during the estate sale. Since he considered himself a sensitive, he made an impromptu inspection and he tried to find cold spots or negative energies or any of that stuff. He said he found nothing, not that that really means a whole lot, and he did not buy anything at the estate sale. The next big break in his case came in the form of an article in Good Housekeeping. It was written by Paul Hoffman, the author who was contracted with William Weber and the Lutzes, and it detailed the Lutzes' experiences in the house and demonic activity there. Now, Paul Hoffman, he's the contract writer. Kaplan didn't know that at the time. But he compared this story to the account that George Lutz had talked to him about, and Kaplan found a whole bunch of inaccuracies and embellishments. George claimed that his children were never affected, but Paul Hoffman claimed that they were. Kathy allegedly turned into some drooling hag in front of George's eyes. Now we had ectoplasm in the story where it wasn't there before. Cloven feet on the bed where there was nothing before. Jody the pig was being created in this moment. Clearly, Paul Hoffman was building a more exciting story than the one George told Stephen Kaplan over the phone when he was trying to get him to investigate. What makes it even stranger is that in May of 1977, the Lutzes sued William Weber. They claimed that he was exploiting them and he was invading their privacy.
Oh, please.
Get this. William Weber countersued for breach of contract because the Lutzes had gone to a different publisher.
But they never signed the contract, right? But
they signed the contract. Oh, they signed the contract.
Oh, they did.
They signed the contract.
Oh, they signed the shitty contract
Yes,
and then
they
went
did.
to a different publisher?
Yes.
God, these people are dumb.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Yeah.
funny because there's this weird incongruity going on where they're at the same time incredible planners and they have a wonderful imagination and they work with people that just create this long-term intricate hoax. And yet they do things like signing contracts and then going back on the contract. And they think and yet they don't think.
They go in spurts, I find. They'll have this burst of planning and reasoning and laying things out. Mm-hmm. And then they'll just kind of fumble around for a little while and then it'll happen again. And it'll happen again. Both of those suits were actually dismissed in 1979, where Judge Jack Weinstein said, "Based on what I have heard, it appears to me that a large extent of the book is a work of fiction, relying in a large part upon the suggestion of Mr. Weber. There is a very serious ethical question when lawyers become literary agents." So, ultimately this led Weber and Hoffman to part ways with the Lutzes. And now free to do whatever they wanted, they returned to Jay Anson, who completed his manuscript, and the Amityville Horror was published on September 13th, 1977. Stephen Kaplan purchased an advanced copy, And at this point, he found that the story had bloated even farther with, violent damage to the house. Jody the pig has become this entire entity in it. It's just the story that we all know today, that we had spent the last 3 episodes talking about. Kaplan called up Jay Anson and questioned him about his involvement. Anson continually repeated the phrase, "I wrote what the Lutzes told me," to pretty much every question that he was asked. And he explained that he didn't even know them. He'd been assigned the project by his publisher, Prentice Hall. For Jay Anson, this was just another contract. He was an IP writer, He was basically just a conduit for the Lutzes to tell their story. He had not been instructed to fact check anything.
I guess I didn't realize how much of an IP writer he was. I kind of thought he was more involved with the family in the story. I guess.
No.
Wow. So
No.
he really is very much outside of this. Like he's just a literary writer.
He was practically a ghost writer for George Lutz.
Yeah, seems like
I mean,
it.
that's what it
Okay.
sounds like. I feel like it feels like, I guess practically, as a ghostwriter, you have to be told a story, right, to write. But it sounds like he didn't investigate anything. He just was told a story and turned it into a novel.
Pretty
and
much.
that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. And to be clear, a lot of the story wasn't even from George Lutz. It was from Paul Hoffman. And then George Lutz added some other stuff onto it. But Paul Hoffman came up with like the ectoplasm and the cloven hoof prints in the snow and all that shit.
Right, and Paul Hoffman was the original author. He was going to be the author.
Yeah, he was contracted with William Weber.
Man, I feel bad for Paul Hoffman.
I
he
know,
came up
dude.
with all these bangers and it's like, nope.
Yep.
Not even close.
And
So Stephen Kaplan then contacted the Rockville Diocese to investigate claims that Father Mancuso had fallen ill after visiting the house and all this stuff. He talked to a bishop who revealed that Mancuso was a pseudonym for Reverend Ralph Pecoraro, although, as we've talked about, his involvement in the case was minimal. No one from the diocese had any concern over any sick clergy. There was never discussion of demonic events or hauntings anywhere in Amityville. In the court case between Weber and the Lutzes, they called Father Pecoraro to testify. And in a sworn affidavit, he claimed that his first contact with the Lutzes was in July of 1975, and he had not been a longtime confidant of Kathy Lutz or anything like that. He said the phone call was his only contact he had had with the family. He never went to the house. He never heard the voices saying, "Get out," or anything like that.
what was the nature of the phone call again?
They wanted him to come and bless the property.
And he didn't do
And
it.
he didn't do it.
That is much more in line of what I understand Catholicism to be. Like I don't know, like family confidants and like deeply involved in demonic cleansings and that shit is just doesn't it's not a thing.
So then Kaplan called up the Brunswick Hospital Center to check and see if Danny Lutz, the son, had been admitted for injured fingers. Remember, his fingers were slammed in the window. There was no record of the Lutzes ever bringing their son to the facility. So that's yet another lie. The Amityville Historical Society claimed that the Lutzes did inquire about the history of their property, but that inquiry came after they had fled their house in January of 1976. Now, that's not necessarily incriminating on their own, but given all these other lies and embellishments, it completes the true timeline of the Amityville horror haunting. So this is what actually happened. George and Kathy Lutz bought a house that was the site of a murder. The house was underpriced given its history, but also because of that, the seller required that half of the cost would be held in escrow, $40,000. This probably cleaned out the Lutz's finances. The furnace almost immediately broke, and the family wasn't able to pay for repairs during a brutally cold and rainy winter. At some point during their brief stay in the house, District Attorney William Weber contacted the family with this idea of spinning his client's story into one of supernatural possession. That was the perfect way for the Lutzes to unburden themselves from this money pit of their freezing cold house. They left after less than a month and immediately began concocting this story of demonic hauntings involving, local Native American tribes, Catholic Church, and evil demon pigs. Seeing the money to be made in light of how The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby were very popular at the time, Weber shot himself in the foot by demanding too much of that pie for himself and his associates. The Lutzes turned their back on him and sold the story to Prentice Hall, who contacted Jay Anson to pen the novel that they had been building with Paul Hoffman. That's the real story. Now, by the fall of 1977, copies of the Amityville Horror were flying off the shelves. Jay Anson was interviewed by the New York Times, and everybody was just kind of taking him at his word. Everybody just believed this story.
Wait, so here's the thing, though. I mean, we could probably go back and read those interviews with him in the New York Times. But Steve Kaplan, talking to Jay Anson, he says, I wrote what the Lutzes told me to write.
Right. Yeah.
That's it, right? Sort of it rings to me almost like I don't recall. I don't recall.
Absolutely. Yep.
Like a one line sort of, that is what he did. Mm-hmm. But also like his publisher told him, don't get into it. Just say you wrote what you were told. But then he's getting interviewed by the New York Times. The New York Times is not interested in an interview of, I wrote what the Lutzes told me. That's not interesting. So what's he saying to them?
Same thing. Well, so the thing is, they weren't investigating Jay Anson the way Stephen Kaplan was investigating Jay Anson. The New York Times was doing a piece on the book and interviewing Jay Anson for it.
So then he can talk about whatever he wants to talk about in terms of how he wrote the book, etc.
Right. Yeah. He talked about how this terrified family came to him and related this story. And the New York Times, unfortunately, didn't do their due diligence and perpetuated this story. Bizarrely, Newsday, a local Long Island publication, actually did a more independent investigation. They said that like the red room under the stairs was just a place for plumbing access. And they uncovered the truth of Jody the pig, which we talked about, that the neighbors had a Siamese cat that would sometimes jump up. The cat would be seen sometimes, and all this stuff. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter because the book was so successful. By the end of 1977, the poor Cromartys found themselves in the center of this media storm. They have a constant flood of tourists and rubberneckers on their streets. And so they changed the address of their house in the hopes of getting some peace and quiet from it. And they ended up filing a $1 million lawsuit against the book's publisher, trying to have the subtitle "A True Story" removed from the cover. They were ultimately unsuccessful.
Oh my God.
That's insane. Especially given that a judge ruled in the Weber and Lutz cases that
it was made up.
It was made up. So he's not ruling against anything.
Yeah. So it should come as no surprise that this successful story was quickly optioned and produced into a movie, and in 1979, the Amityville Horror was released. Filmmakers tried to shoot the movie at the actual house, but of course the Cromartys were like, no, fuck off. And they had to shoot it at a house in Toms River, New Jersey instead. And the production company actually paid to construct a functional boathouse on the property and convert that house to look like the one in Amityville. The film grossed $7.8 million during its opening weekend, the equivalent of about $30 million today, and became the second highest grossing film of the year behind Kramer vs. Kramer. Today, it still ranks as the 8th highest grossing horror film of all time. George Lutz claimed that he received $100,000 from the film's release. Despite all that success, Margot Kidder, who played Kathy, called the film a piece of shit and said, "I couldn't believe anyone would take it seriously. I laughed the whole way through it. It was crazy Christians who made it a hit. They wanted people to believe in the devil and possessions and haunted houses and all that hooey."
Wait a minute. This was the main actress of the film?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
She was like, fuck off, everyone.
Yeah.
This is not what you would expect an actor to do on their rounds after a film.
This was late. This was not in promotion of the film. This was later on. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this wasn't like
She
doing
did
the
Ben
late night
Affleck
shows.
this. Yeah.
Doing the late night shows, she's like, this is all a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, it fucking sucks. Don't go see it.
She's got the 1,000-yard stare.
But I think this explains a big part of the film's success. You know, we keep talking. The late 70s and 80s, they're this heyday for horror cinema. And a big part of that is because of the Jesus movement and the religious overtones that are influencing so many of these films. At its core, the Amityville horror film, book, all of it, is the story of good versus evil, which is to say religion versus the devil. Father Mancuso, called in the film Father Delaney, is this holy warrior. He's protecting the innocent family against evil, right? The Lutzes themselves, they fell back on religion for protection. They were quoting Bible verses because that was what was gonna stop the darkness, you know? And then I think the other reason that the film was so successful was the financial woes that it depicted. Horror author Stephen King, in his commentary on horror fiction, Danse Macabre, points out that the house represents a financial horror as well as a spiritual one. He said, "The picture's subtext is one of economic unease, and this is a theme that director Stuart Rosenberg plays on constantly. In terms of the times, 18% inflation, mortgage rates out of sight, gasoline selling at a cool $1 for a gallon. $1 a gallon for gasoline. The Amityville horror, like The Exorcist, could not have come at a more opportune moment." He points out how, remember, the house stole money from them, right? Right? They had their Kathy's brother came over and the ghost stole money from him. But to Stephen King, that's a clear representation of the financial quicksand that a new house can be in fragile economic times. You think you know what you're getting into by buying a house, and you're not really prepared for the horrors that might lurk in that house that you don't know about.
That's real horror right there.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's scary.
Personal bankruptcy, debt. That's horrifying. That'll keep you up at night.
You know?
Not being able to keep your house, your family warm.
Yeah. And the terror of going into something and being like, I think this is a good idea, but we don't really know what's here. You know, like anything could be here and it could be something horrible.
And it does play at our baser instincts. Like, if you think about it, back in the day, it was important for us to keep to have our tribe and stay safe from the big animal predators. And when you were isolated, you were vulnerable. And when you weren't good at your job, hunting, gathering, all those things, it was a death sentence. It was terrible. And so it's a very like common, it's more of a modern take on that. If you can't keep your family safe in the house that you have chosen, are you a failure? Like, I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying, like, it's difficult. Like, we had the same thing when we bought our house. We came up against the same thing. Mm-hmm. Our heater broke.
Yep.
Within a month of buying our house.
That's not true.
No, wasn't it?
It was, we bought our house in March, and that fall, that November, shortly after we turned our heat on for that winter, our furnace crapped out and we had to replace it.
Yeah, I get us confused with the Lutzes a lot. But yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, this happened to a friend recently. Their partner had owned the house for a few years, so it wasn't like this happened immediately. But one day the garbage disposal backed up and, that happens. So they tried all the usual things to get it unclogged. It wasn't working. They call a plumber. Turns out their entire line was old and crappy, in the yard, out to this, linking up to the city sewer, all of that. They had to get the entire thing replaced. They had to dig out the back, they had to dig out the backyard, whole new pipe, whole thing, whole sewer line. And, it's good that they did it. It's good that nothing more serious had gone awry when they discovered the problem with the garbage disposal. But it was a lot of money that they were not expecting to spend, and that they had to scramble to figure out how to be able to pay for. But back to the story and back to the point, which is that houses are expensive and things can go awry.
So in the end, William Weber's strategy had spectacularly backfired. Remember, his original intention was to get Butch DeFeo a retrial based on the grounds that I guess he had been spiritually influenced by demons. But due to his feud with the Lutzes over the book and movie rights, he'd been forced to reveal that the whole story was fake, created over, quote, many bottles of wine. So now there's a whole fucking paper trail that proves that it's fabricated. Weber has no choice but to throw his hands up, and Butch DeFeo will spend the rest of his life in prison.
He probably should. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He did. He was at least complicit in the murder of 6 people. Yeah, probably not a bad thing.
Bad
right?
man.
Yeah, I like I said at the beginning, the guy killed a bunch of people, or at least 2. So
yeah. Now the Lutzes had their own unique problem though, because they'd achieved a great deal of success from their story, but they had Stephen Kaplan and the Cromarties and really all of the Amityville residents constantly shouting, "This house isn't haunted." The Lutzes, however, want to capitalize on this story and squeeze as much blood out of the supernatural stone as they can. And so, in 1982, a new book was published titled The Amityville Horror Part 2. Written by John G. Jones, this book tried to explain why everyone said the house wasn't haunted. See, according to Jones, the demons actually followed the Lutz family when they left the house, and it was continuing to plague them and will continue to plague them throughout the rest of their lives.
The subtitle of that book should have been called The Moving Goalpost.
Maybe it could have been the subtitle of any of the other books that were published. The Amityville Final Chapter, Amityville The Evil Escapes, or Amityville The Horror Returns.
The goalpost moves again.
People with more specific knowledge of paranormal entities than me, please speak up. But my understanding, I always thought the only entity, if you will, that is attached to a human is a poltergeist, or perhaps a demon if you're possessed by a demon. Right. But demons don't follow people around. I've never heard that.
Katie, they can, because it's all made up anyway.
I know.
They can do whatever they want.
I get
that.
No, I'll push back a little bit on that, because there was a show called Paranormal State, and there was a demon that they encountered in multiple episodes that their lead investigator became convinced was following them.
Oh, yeah.
Although I will say that's the only time I've ever experienced that as a thing. But that I mean,
to EJ's point, that sounds like a really good plot point in some made up bullshit for a show. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why I'm getting annoyed. They made all this stuff up to make money, and they did. So kudos.
But right, you're right. But Katie, I think in the canon of paranormal, I think you're right. Like, I think it's mostly just like poltergeists and demons. I don't know. Like, yeah, somebody else write in and tell us if there's another type of ghost that likes to follow people around. But I guess maybe ghosts that are possessed in objects like Annabelle, if you want to believe that.
Yeah, I guess Annabelle moves wherever the doll goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's possessing an object, but she's not following something.
No, she's not following anyone. She lives in the doll.
Right.
Like that's different. Or just your very innocent classic ghosts of your grandmother made herself known to you or something. Right. And that's more of an idea of a spirit wanting to connect with a human, not that they're not following them around in that sense. It's they know you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a little bit different than what the Lutzes are saying.
I guess the ghosts knew the Lutzes at that point, though. They just thought they were cool guys. By the time Amityville It's About Time was released direct to video in 1992, The Lutzes actually had disappeared from the story altogether, and so had the house. In that movie, Stephen Macht plays Jacob Sterling, an architect who buys a clock from the original Amityville house, which is haunted and causes him and his family a bunch of distress, and one of his daughters turns into a vampire for some reason.
Wow, that sounds like the other version of Tommy Wiseau's The Room, where he also turns into a vampire and drives off in a car, a flying car. Yeah. Okay, I like it.
Here is what I respect about this as just a general, separating it from a entirely made up story, but taking it as a media series, a collection of stories that are loosely based around the same thing. Like, if you're just setting out to make a lot of money off of some IP that sells well, that's a good story plot line, right? You take something from the original house, you remove it, and then you can have entirely new characters, entirely new stuff. You could then, let's say it wasn't direct to video and it had actually done well, then, have an Indiana Jones thing. The clock gets lost and then someone finds it in a thrift store. I mean, you could just follow this clock around wherever you wanted to.
It belongs in Zach Bacon's museum.
It belongs in the Haunted Museum. How to make a spin-off
franchise 101.
Yeah. In June of 1995, Stephen Kaplan, our vampirologist and paranormal investigator, died of a heart attack. His book, The Amityville Horror Conspiracy, was self-published posthumously by his wife, Roxanne. The book chronicles Kaplan's 2-decade-long investigation of the case, told through his journal entries. According to the Kaplans, multiple publishers refused the manuscript because, quote, no one cares about the truth. Roxanne quoted Stephen Kaplan as saying, they love to hear a good ghost story, whether it's true or not.
See, I feel like the exact opposite is true.
I know.
You have this huge franchise and you have this guy that's saying it's all false.
It's all false.
Like, I think that people love that kind of drama.
I love that drama. That's why we're talking about it. Yeah.
EJ, you look skeptical. You think no?
Yeah, I think she's right. I think it's killing a cash cow, kind of. It's admitting that it's all fake. I mean, the whole thing lives and breathes off of the hope that the audience believes in it. And if you turn on that hose of skepticism, then you're turning off the money hose.
The Warrens, on the other hand, leveraged their investigation at Amityville to boost their clout in the paranormal investigation world. In 1980, Ed had no problem selling a biography of his life titled The Demonologist, The Extraordinary Career of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Wait, Ed wrote that?
He didn't write it. It was his biography.
Or somebody else wrote it?
Yeah, somebody else wrote it.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
They will continue to investigate claims of hauntings and demonic possession until Ed's death in 2006. Lorraine continued to offer her medium abilities through the New England Society for Psychic Research until her death in 2019. In 2016, the Amityville Horror was featured in The Conjuring 2, with Lorraine Warren, played by Vera Farmiga, seeing a ghostly nun in the house. Now, that never happened in the actual story or in the actual Amityville mythology, but the nun got her own spin-off series. Then that's been coming out as well.
What's that?
Oh, The Nun? Yeah, The Nun was a horror movie, and then there's The Nun 2, and I think The Nun 3. There's a whole Conjuring universe, Katie. There's The Conjuring, there's Annabelle, and then there's The Nun, and they all exist under the same umbrella.
Wow, I didn't know The Nun was connected to the Amityville at all.
Yeah, it's major IP. Yeah. 1 year later, a woman named Judith Penny filed a lawsuit against the film's producers, claiming that she had been sexually assaulted by Ed Warren with Lorraine's blessing for many years. Allegedly, Penny had moved into the Warrens' home when she was 15. They had engaged in a sexual relationship for 40 years. When Penny became pregnant, the Warrens pressured her to claim that she had been raped rather than own up to it and expose themselves. Lorraine Warren's contract with New Line Cinema further provided circumstantial evidence of Ed's relationship with Penny. During the making of the Conjuring movies, Lorraine forbid any instance of Ed engaging in crimes including sex with minors, child pornography, prostitution, or sexual assault, and neither he nor Lorraine could be depicted as having affairs. And according to the Hollywood Reporter and talent attorney Jill Smith, that is unusually specific language for such a contract.
Yeah, it sounds very guilty.
Yeah. It'd be one thing to just kind of be like, oh, I don't really want to have a sex scene between me and Ed on screen, whatever. But when you get into that, like, oh, by the way, just make sure you don't have Ed engaging in any child pornography. You're like, really? Really? Like, we weren't, but now I think there might be more to this story here.
Yeah. Can we tell that story instead, please?
Exactly. Yeah. In 2012, Daniel Lutz was profiled in a feature documentary, My Amityville Horror. He talked at length about his experiences, and he actually supports most of what is claimed in Jay Anson's book. But he also talks about how much he hated George Lutz, his abusive stepfather. It's clear that George Lutz and Kathy, like both of the parents, warped their children's view of the world and their upbringing by convincing them that they grew up in a supernaturally haunted house. Daniel dropped out of school and ran away from home when he was a teenager. He was unhoused for a time before taking up residence in California. When they asked him about his stepfather, Daniel told the filmmakers that he was happy that George Lutz was dead. Daniel described himself as, quote, Danny's bodyguard, and said, all I do is walk around protecting that 10-year-old kid, referring to himself. Imagine going through your entire life convinced that something happened to you and being told that you were wrong or you were lying. Imagine how much that would fuck you up.
Yeah, it's so messed up. And it seems to me that there was nobody there to protect Danny and those kids. Like, there was nobody that had their best interests at heart. And you can just see the pain in Daniel to this day, you know. All the things that weren't said that he probably wish he was older and could have said, and older to protect himself and his siblings and all these things. And it's got to be so hard.
Yeah, and he believes all of it. Like, he believes that everything happened. He recounted the story of the window and getting his fingers smashed. He says that he saw spirits in the house, like everything.
He still does. Daniel still does.
Yes.
But I thought we talked about in an earlier episode that Daniel said that it was just a couple of minutes with his fingers getting smashed in the window.
Yeah, that's what he says. He didn't go to the hospital. They were smashed, and then he watched them get better. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
okay. So, I mean, that's still, to me, I mean, that's like, as I discussed at length before, I think that's probably a normal thing that could happen to you with a window in an old house.
Well, he also thinks that while he was watching them get better, there was a spirit that walked into the room and sat down on the couch across from him.
Ooh.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he's deeply, deeply convinced about all of this.
I think it's really sweet that he's protecting his younger self. And I actually think that that's a very therapeutic thing to do. A therapist would tell you to consider your younger self as a different person, and protecting your younger self can be a really soothing way as a grown-up to heal some of your childhood trauma, because you become the adult watching over that little kid that's still living inside of you and is hurt or sad for some reason. But then I also think too, I mean, it's kind of a really smart way to divorce yourself from a traumatic past in a way. Like, you are now a grown-up who has a say about who you are and what your life is, versus this child that you were who had no say and no control over what was happening to you. So I think that's a really smart thing that he's doing for himself and for little Danny, who doesn't exist anymore, but went through a hard time.
I think it's what he needs to do to survive. Yeah.
And while he's protecting Danny, he's learning how to protect himself as an adult. Because he, as far as the documentary goes, he seemed extremely, like, protective of himself too as a grown man. Yeah. Like, he has his space, he has his hobbies, he has the things that make him happy, and I think he's very, they're sacred to him.
And to be clear, I think that Daniel Lutz 100% believes everything that he thinks he saw. I don't think that it actually happened, but I think that he believes that it happened to his core. I don't want to just dismiss him, because I also think that he would be very offended if we did that. But I believe that he believes that that is all true.
Oh yeah, he lives with this. He lives with that horror.
Yes.
And he's doing the best he can to heal from it.
Yeah. Since the 1990s, Butch DeFeo has denied that there was any spiritual influence over him during the murders in 1974. He claimed that he only killed his sister, Dawn, and that she and someone else killed the rest of the family. And he also claimed that he and Dawn planned the whole thing with friends after his father attempted to kill him. After they killed the rest of the family, Butch quarreled with Dawn and shot her point blank in the chest. In the early 2000s, author Rick Osuna picked up the story and interviewed Butch DeFeo in prison. After a 6-hour interview, he wrote his impressions of Butch, and he said, "Butch has become the one thing he loathed the most, his father. Butch is a monster. He is a victim. He is a confused little boy. He is a coward. He is a schemer. He undoubtedly is a cold-blooded mass murderer. The latter two serve Butch well in an institution he assumingly will spend the rest of his life. Discussions with individuals who are close to Butch have revealed a complex sociopathic character." In a 2003 article in the Skeptical Inquirer, Joe Nickel asserts that Butch's story is too inconsistent to believe and said, "I remain unconvinced. Butch DeFeo has forfeited his right to be believed, and his current tale is full of implausibilities and contradictions. Osuna appears to me simply to have become yet another of his victims." Butch DeFeo died in prison in 2021, taking the truth of that night with him. I think, unfortunately, the mystery of the murders at Amityville will forever go unsolved. Over the decades, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue, or should I say formerly at 112 Ocean Avenue, changed hands several times, most recently, as you said, Katie, in 2017. The iconic quarter-round windows were replaced, the back porch was screened in. Not a single resident after the Lutzes have reported paranormal events in the house. Despite this, the Amityville murders, the Lutzes account, and the aftermath left an indelible mark on the paranormal community. A ghost story built on a real tragedy and capitalizing on the country's fears of financial strain and the conflict between good and evil in pop culture has become one of the most iconic haunted house stories in history. It doesn't matter that this was all fabricated as a plea bargain by a lawyer and a get-rich-quick scheme by a financially strapped family. It doesn't matter that all of the facts are wrong, both about the history of the house and the land and the actual events that occurred during that short month that the Lutzes lived in the house. As Stephen Kaplan said, they love to hear a good ghost story, whether it is true or not. In our case, it's not. But it's still a good ghost story. And it's one that we will be telling and retelling, I imagine, for many years to come. That's the story of the Amityville haunting.
It is a good ghost story.
It is, right? Even if it's not true.
Like, if you strip it back, if you told this ghost story around the campfire, not as if it were true, but as just a well-told ghost story, you'd be like, what a great ghost story.
Right, yeah. It is. It's great. I mean, it's iconic. It totally changed the way we looked at haunted house cinema. It launched the careers of these paranormal investigators. You know, because of Amityville, Ed and Lorraine had clout to go and start training paranormal investigators, which they did. And then these paranormal investigators would break off and start their own little groups. Like we would not have paranormal investigation as a field in the form that it is without Amityville.
All because of a broken heater. Well, actually, no.
No, I mean,
It's because of a murder.
all because of a mass murderer, but then because of a broken heater. Yeah. And, I mean, there's probably a theoretical question that you could ask, which is if the Lutz's heater hadn't broken in the winter of 1975, 1976, would any of this have happened, or would they have just continued along their pleasant way and been fine? We don't know.
Yeah. What was a financial problem turned into a financial boon. So good on them.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's like the great American success story in a weird way. Thank you all so much for joining us on this excursion into Long Island and Amityville. As always, please, if you like what you hear, share the podcast with your friends. If you feel like being a little bit generous, head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com, click on the support us button at the top of the page, and consider leaving a donation or becoming one of our supporters. And yeah, keep it spooky.
And thank you very much to our supporters and listeners. You guys are the best.
We love you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye.
Be safe out there.
Next time, you creep through the halls of a remote monastery, high on the slopes of a Himalayan mountain. The wind outside howls like a wild animal. In these halls, the monks guard a gruesome artifact that could prove the existence of a legendary monster. If only you can find it.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the 40 in History podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways you can show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on socials at Slaying Monsters Podcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.